What we're going to do today is start looking at the idea of randomness and random number generation using technology, specifically computers. To do that, we're going to start with a little bit of work in Excel. And to do that, of course, we're going to have to learn a little bit about Excel. So if you're already familiar with Excel or how a spreadsheet like this works, it could be numbers or it could be Google. Can't remember what Google's one's called actually, but the Google version, Google Sheets actually, there it is. They all work similar. The commands might be slightly different. The screen will obviously look a little bit different, but the structure, the ideas are the same. So you can do it in any of them, but I'm going to recommend that you work in Excel so that it's going to be exactly the same as this video. The spreadsheet I've got set up is a really basic simulation of flipping a coin. So we're trying to work out whether we get a heads or a tails for each flip. Now, we're going to talk more about the random component in the next lesson, but today we're going to focus on getting this spreadsheet to work. So I said, if you are pretty familiar with Excel, you might want to go off and have a go for yourself first, and then come back for some help if you need it, or just watch through and you can have a go with us. So what I'm going to do is basically recreate what I have here on a new page or a new spreadsheet so that you can actually see it. But just before I do, I'll quickly explain what's happening. We have just a simple column here that's keeping track of which round of the game I've played, so which flip of the coin it is. So we're going to be doing 10 flips. I've got a result here whether I've got a heads or a tails. This random number is what we're actually using to generate our heads or tails, and I'll explain that in a moment. And I've just done some basic statistics on the side. So how many counts we've got, rounds we've got, how many were heads, how many were tails, and what percentage of each there was. Now, the great thing about a spreadsheet is, of course, these are not actually numbers, these are formulas. So if I click on this cell here, this cell right here, and I look up the top to what we call our formula bar, it's actually a formula, it's a calculation. So this is actually a live set of information. So if I make any change, and I'm just going to literally press the space bar on this different cell over here and press enter, hopefully you notice that everything recalculates. So all these random numbers recalculated, which caused all these other things to change. So I'll just do that a few more times so you can see it. So here you go, we've changed to a 60-40 set of heads and tails. So the numbers are changing because we are recalculating all the formulas in here. This will make a bit more sense as we go along. So I'm going to go down the bottom and just start a new sheet in this particular spreadsheet. You could just open up, go File, New. That's fine, but I'm just going to start a new one over here. First thing I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit so that it's a bit clearer for you guys. So I'm going to go to 150% zoom. You may not need to do that, of course, on your screen. Just on mine in the video, it's a bit too small. So we're going to start with the simplest thing at the moment. We're just going to put our round in. So in this first cell, so these boxes are called cells, and this is referenced by the row and the column and then the row. So this is A1, so just on a grid, A1. I'm just going to type the word round. So I'm just literally typing straight in. That's just plain text. It's obviously not a calculation. I'm then going to go press number 1, 2, 3, and just go down this column, putting in the numbers 1 to 10 to represent the rounds. So again, this is just still considered text because it's not an actual calculation. Even though these are numbers, it's just plain. It's not going to change with each calculation that we do. The next column we're going to have, I'm just calling that rand, and you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to call this next column in C1 the result. So I'm just typing those in. Okay, let's have a look at our first formula. So let's click up here into B2, so this cell here, B2. And I'm going to start my formula by pressing the equals button. So a formula always starts with the equal sign. And you may have noticed when I typed that, this formula bar up here has opened up. So I'm going to type my formula in, but you'll see it coming up in the formula bar as well. The formula I'm going to use is actually called RAND, and it's an abbreviation of random. I'm sorry, this B3 is in the way there, but that is the formula there. It actually needs two brackets, open and close brackets, and this might look a little bit familiar from when we did some Python or programming earlier on. But that formula is basically going to pick a random number between 0 and 1. So when I press enter to finish this now, you can see I have a random number between 0 and 1. It is a decimal number, decimal number. You could technically get 0 and you could technically get 0.9 all the way up. It's a number in between. Now, I could go to the next cell down and type equals rand again. Okay, press enter and get another random number. But I'm going to do something to speed this up a little bit. If I click my left mouse button and highlight two of these cells, so you've got the box around them, you might just be able to see down the bottom right hand corner that it's a little bit more square. It's a little sort of square sitting there. If I move my mouse onto that square, notice what happens to my cursor. So it's a little X at the moment, but as I move over that, it's changed to a different X. If I click and hold my left mouse button now and drag my mouse, I'm dragging that formula down. I'm basically making copies of it row by row. So when I get down to my last row that I want and let go, you'll see I've actually filled in that formula going all the way down. So that's a really quick way of doing something over and over again for a lot of rows. And that's going to be super useful at a later stage for you. You just have to trust me on this. Now, what we have is we know which round is happening, and we've got a random number that we know is going to be between 0 and 1. But we don't really want to look at this number. That's not going to help us. It's not a head or a tail. So what we're going to do is use another formula to basically say that if our random number is between 0 and 0.5, or actually technically just under 0.5, then we will show one thing such as heads, and if it's 5 or above, we'll show tails. So we're basically doing a type of rounding, if you like. So depending on which way we round up or down, we're going to show a different result. So in programming that we've done before, we've learned about the if statement. If some sort of condition is true, we do one action, else we do another action. And of course, something like Excel has those type of commands. So we're going to start a new formula. So it always starts with the equals, the keyword if, and we open up our brackets. Now, this pop-up is telling us what we need to fill in. So the next thing we need is a logical test, something that's going to be either true or false. Then we have a comma, and we have whatever's going to happen if it's true, a comma, and whatever will happen if it's false. And then we're going to close off our round brackets. And you'll see this sort of pop-up happen for most of the formula commands that you type in. So if you're not sure exactly what things the formula needs, you can look at that pop-up for a bit of help. Now, our formula is going to be if this number here, the number next to it is, let's say, greater than or equal, greater than 5, or 0.5, sorry, not 5, 0.5, because our number's between 0 and 1. So if our number is greater than 0.5, let's decide we're going to say heads. And obviously, if it's not greater than 0.5, that must mean we're going to call it tails. So we need to reference this cell. We're not going to type in 0.05 because that's going to change every time we do something different. We're going to create a reference to the cell. So we're basically going to say if B2, so this reference here, B2 is greater than 0.5. So we can type that in. If B2, and notice how that square that we're referencing has now been highlighted to show us exactly what we're talking about. So B2 is greater than 0.5. That's our logical test. It's a greater than situation, so it's going to either be true or it's going to be false. So it's a logical test. Put our comma in. We now want to put in what's going to be shown in this cell if this is true. We want it to be heads. Now we can't just type the word heads in because it needs to know that it's text. So we have to wrap it up in quotation marks. So we're going to say heads like that. Put another comma, and now we're going to put what happens if it's false. So if B2 is not greater than 0.5, which we will call tails. So that formula there is an if statement in Excel that says if this condition is true, so if the value in B2, the cell B2, is greater than 0.5, we're now going to show the value heads. And if it's not, if it's less than or equal to, in this case, 0.5, it's going to show the word tails. So we press enter to save that, and we can see it seems to be working. Here is our value, 0.59. That is greater than 0.5, so it should be heads. If we did this in the next box, we might see something different. Now, remember that trick that we learned just before about dragging it down? Let's do that again. So let's just choose that box, grab that little square in the corner, and drag that down. And that has dragged down our formula. And if we look carefully, the first one is talking about B2, the cell next to it. If I look at the next one down, it's talking about B3, still the next one next to it. This one's talking about B4. So when we drag that formula down and fill in those cells, it actually adjusted our formula each time, so it's still pointed to the right cell. And that's why it's so powerful, because most of the time, with just a little bit of thinking, you can even fill a formula down very, very quickly. So here we now have our rounds being played. Every time we do something, so again, I'm just going to press space to trigger the change and press enter. You can see every time we change this, we are getting a different heads or tails set of results over here. So let's do a couple more, just pressing space and enter just to trigger a change. Every time a value changes, it recalculates everything. And why is it changing? Because these are creating a random number every single time. Okay, the last part we had is some quick statistics. So introduce a couple more things. First, we'll just put some headings in. So the first thing we're going to do is just have our total count. All right, then we're going to have total heads, total tails, percentage of heads, and percentage of tails. So they're just, again, text just for some headings. Now, again, we could just write the number 10 in here, but let's use a formula to work it out for us. So we're going to say equals, and this formula is going to be count, just with a bracket like that. And now we're going to choose to count everything in this range that we call it. And the easiest way to do that is click on the first one, holding our button down, drag over, selecting everything that we want to count, and let go. And you'll see that that has added a range of values in here. All I need to do is close my round bracket, press enter, and you can see that it's counted them up. Okay, don't get confused thinking it's taken the 10 or something. It's counted how many values we have here. All right. We can do a similar thing with a check as well. So we can combine a count with an if statement. There's another formula called count if. Open the round bracket. It still wants a range of things to count, but then it's going to take a criteria, something to check before it counts them. So let's count this section here, our heads and tails. So let's highlight over that, clicking our left button and dragging over it. There's our range. Put our comma in, and now it's looking for the criteria. The criteria, we're just going to choose to say heads. All right. We don't need to put an equal sign there or anything like that. It's just saying if what it sees in the box is this word in quotes heads, then it's going to count it. If it doesn't see that, it's going to not count it. And it has to be an exact match though. So if you have heads 1 or something, it's not going to work. Close our bracket, press enter, and you can see it's got the number 4. If we look, there's 1 there, 2 there, 3, 4. So that is correct. Okay. Let's do it again in the tail. So count if, okay, that range, put a comma in so that we've got the next part, and our criteria will be tails. Close our bracket, press enter, and there we go. So at the moment, right now, we've got 6 heads and 4 tails. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heads, and 1, 2, 3, 4 tails. Pretty straightforward. The last bit we'll do is just some very generic maths. This is not going to use a formula as such, not a built-in formula. It's going to just be some math. So if we want to get a percentage of something, we should know that we take the number we have, divide it by the total number of things, and then we usually might multiply it by 100 to take it from a decimal into a whole number. We won't quite have to do that. I'll show you why. So let's work out our percentage of heads. Equals, because it's still a formula, it's still something we have to calculate. We're going to reference this number here. So we're going to click on there. So we're now saying it's equal to the value in F5, this box here, divided by, now in spreadsheets and in a lot of programming, divided by is the forward slash. There's not a line with 2 dots on it. It's a slash forward. Again, you probably remember that from programming. And we're going to divide it by this total. Okay, so really at the moment, this is the same as saying 6 divided by 10. But we're really saying whatever's in this blue box here, F5, divided by whatever's showing up in this red box being F3. Press enter, and we can see that at the moment, because everything's just changed again, it's 0.5. But we want a percentage. So again, we could multiply that by 100 to turn that into 50, but Excel has a really quick way of doing that. We can just display it as a percentage. We're not going to technically change the 0.5, we're just going to make it show as 50%. And we do that by changing the formatting of this box. And I'm going to do that by going to the Home menu, and I'm going to click on this percentage sign. So we can change it to represent in dollars format, percentages, back to a normal number that we're used to, that's the comma. And we can also change how many decimal places we show just by clicking these buttons here. So if I click this percentage button now, you can see that that 0.5 is displaying as 50% because 0.5 is a half, 50%. It technically didn't change the number. If I wanted to use this value in a calculation, it would still be a 0.5, but it is showing it to us in a way that we want, being percentage. Let's finish it off with the tails. So it's going to be equal to the number of tails we have divided by the total number of games that we've played, or the count. Press enter, and again it's still 0.5 at the moment, and we're going to turn that into a percentage, or show it as a percentage. And there we have right now a 50-50 split between heads and tails. Let's see that change a little bit. So we're just going to put some blank spaces and press enter so that the numbers change. So here we go, we've gone 6 and 4, and that of course gives us 60-40 split. Let's do it one more time. There we go, 70-30. So that is a really quick introduction to using Excel to show something that we may be able to do other ways, of course, but it's a quick and easy way. It kind of seems like a little bit of a silly example, but what we want to talk about next lesson is the idea of random and whether in fact computers can create random numbers. And to do that, we need a little bit of data around random numbers. So after you've created this, I'm going to challenge you to extend this, to improve this, and I want to see 1,000 flips of the coin. How can you change this spreadsheet so that it still does the same thing, but does it for 1,000 flips of the coin. Now, obviously, we could just go 11, 12, 13, all the way down to 1,000 and put the random in and do everything. But there are some better ways. So that's a challenge for you to see if you can come up with how to do this more efficiently so that you can have the Excel spreadsheet simulate 1,000 flips of the coin, basically. All right. So create this version. Make sure you've saved this. So file saved as per usual. And then maybe make a copy of that to make your 1,000 attempt. I am going to want to see this version. So don't just go over the top of it. Make sure you still got the 10 flips of the coin version. I'm not, sorry, and you'll have to submit that on Schoolbox, sorry. So make sure I'm very clear on that. The 10 version will get submitted on Schoolbox before the next class. But by that stage, hopefully some of you will work out how you can actually change this to do 1,000 flips of the coin. Thanks very much. I know it's a little bit of a long video. You may need to go back over it a couple of times, but you do have 2 weeks. Please make sure you get this done and you get this version of the file submitted on Schoolbox before next fortnight's lesson. Okay, very, very important. If you have any questions, email as usual, or if it happens to be still class time when you're watching this, you can obviously do that in the discussion on Schoolbox as well. But outside of class time, make sure you're using email. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you in 2 weeks' time.